You're tuned in to Beyond the Known. It was August 15th, 1977, a quiet night at Ohio State University's Big Ear radiotelescope. And then, for exactly 72 seconds, the silence of the cosmos broke. A single powerful signal from deep space appeared, one that would baffle scientists and ignite decades of mystery. On the computer printout, a scientist simply circled it and wrote one word: wow. Welcome to this episode of Beyond the Known. Today, we're taking you on an exploration of the WOW signal, one of the most extraordinary and unexplained transmissions ever detected from space. First, we'll define what the WOW signal is and why it's so mysterious. Then we'll explore extraordinary theories that attempt to explain its origin. And finally, we'll step back and let science offer its most grounded explanations. Now that we've set the stage, let's start with taking a closer look at what the WOW signal actually was and why it became one of astronomy's greatest puzzles. So the detection happened back in 1977 at Ohio State University's Big Ear radiotelescope. What was the situation there at the time?
Well, the Big Ear was originally part of this big Ohio sky survey, but by 1977, funding, specifically from the National Science Foundation, had dried up. So the observatory was really running on, well, a shoestring budget. It depended heavily on volunteers and, spare time from the remaining staff.
That explains why it wasn't a real-time discovery then.
Exactly. The telescope itself, it was a fixed dual-horn transit system. Basically, it scanned the sky as the Earth turned, printing out data. And this data wasn't looked at immediately. It was days later that a volunteer astronomer, Jerry Eman, was manually going through these printouts, these pages of just numbers and letters.
And he spots something unusual.
He spots the sequence, the famous 6EQUJ5. He circled it, wrote "wow" in the margin, and, well, the name stuck. It was that remarkable.
Let's break down that sequence, 6EQUJ5. What does it actually represent?
It's a measure of the signal strength, specifically the signal-to-noise ratio, or SN. It was recorded over 6 consecutive 12-second periods. The numbers 1 through 9 meant the signal was that many standard deviations above the background noise, but the letters, they indicated even stronger signals.
And U was the peak?
U was the highest value the system could print, representing anything 30 standard deviations or more above the noise. Analysis later pinned it down to about 30.5 times stronger than the background. Just statistically, it was way off the charts for typical noise.
And the duration, 72 seconds. That's also significant, isn't it?
Highly significant. 72 seconds is precisely the time it should take for a fixed point source, something far out in space, to drift through the Big Ear's specific beam width because of Earth's rotation. So that timing strongly suggested it wasn't, local interference or something drifting in the atmosphere. It behaved like something from deep space.
Okay, so strong. Lasted just the right amount of time. What else made it stand out?
Its structure. The signal was exceptionally narrowband. Measurements put its bandwidth at 10 kilohertz or possibly even less.
And why is narrowband so important?
Because natural cosmic sources, think stars, galaxies, quasars, they tend to radiate energy across a really broad range of frequencies. It's like cosmic static. But a narrowband signal is much more like, an artificial radio transmission. It implies technology, a way to concentrate energy efficiently into a specific frequency channel. It just screams artificial to many researchers.
Where did it come from? Do we know the location?
Broadly, yes. It came from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius, which is, a very dense part of the sky near the center of our Milky Way galaxy. The initial position wasn't super precise, but later reanalysis of the old data has really narrowed it down. We now think it originated from one of 2 small adjacent patches of sky. The search area is much smaller now.
And the frequency itself, that's maybe the most famous part.
It's certainly one of the most compelling aspects. The signal was centered right around 120.4556 megahertz. And that is incredibly close to 1420.406 megahertz, the natural emission frequency of neutral hydrogen atoms, the famous 21-centimeter line.
Hydrogen being the most common element in the universe.
Exactly. And for decades, SETI researchers, those searching for extraterrestrial intelligence, have flagged the region around the hydrogen line, often called the water hole, as the logical place for interstellar communication.
Why the water hole?
It's a relatively quiet spot in the cosmic radio spectrum, sandwiched between the hydrogen line and the hydroxyl H line. The thinking is that any intelligent civilization wanting to signal across the cosmos would pick this universally significant, quiet frequency. It's like a cosmic dialing code everyone should know.
So we have this incredibly strong narrowband signal lasting the right duration coming from deep space right near the hydrogen line frequency. It sounds like the perfect ETI signal, but there's a catch, isn't there? The biggest mystery.
The biggest mystery is its transience. It was never detected again. And more specifically, the way Big Ear was designed should have helped confirm it if it were a continuous source.
How so? The dual horn system.
Right. Big Ear had two feed horns looking at slightly different parts of the sky simultaneously. A source drifting through its view should have been seen by the first horn, and then, about 2 minutes and 50 seconds later, by the second horn. One signal would be positive, the other inverted in the data.
But the wow signal
Only appeared in one horn, the positive one. It was gone by the time that patch of sky drifted over the second horn. This implies the signal either shut off abruptly or it was incredibly brief, lasting less than that crucial 2.5-minute window.
And no one's ever found it since, despite looking.
Despite decades of searching with much more powerful telescopes like the Very Large Array and others, nothing. It blinked into existence for 72 seconds and then vanished. That non-repeatability is the core of the enduring puzzle.
Now that we understand what made the wow signal so unique, it's time to journey into the extraordinary, the theories that reach beyond the boundaries of what we know. Given all those characteristics, narrowband, hydrogen line frequency, the intensity, the ETI hypothesis that it was an alien signal seems almost unavoidable to consider.
It's certainly the most captivating explanation, and it rests on sound logic, particularly regarding efficiency and universality. As we discussed, making a signal narrowband concentrates the power. If you're trying to send a signal across light years, you need to make it stand out against the background noise. Focusing the energy is the smart, economical way to do it.
And choosing the hydrogen line frequency. It's like saying, we understand the basic physics of the universe, just like you.
Precisely. It's picking a landmark frequency that any technological species should recognize. It's less about the message content itself and more about announcing your presence using a universal constant, a sort of cosmic hello based on shared knowledge.
There's also more technical arguments supporting ETI, related to the signal's frequency stability.
Yes, this is quite subtle but important. The measured frequency was remarkably stable during those 72 seconds. Now think about all the motions involved. The Earth rotating and orbiting the sun, our solar system moving through the galaxy, and potentially the source's own planet and star moving. All these motions cause Doppler shifts, changing the perceived frequency. For the received signal to be so stable, the source might have had to actively correct for all these complex relative motions in real time.
Which implies a very sophisticated understanding of physics and engineering.
It points towards a level of technology capable of calculating its motion relative to a target system light years away and adjusting its transmission frequency second by second to compensate. That's extremely advanced.
But how does the ETI theory explain the fact that we only heard it once? That transience.
One popular idea is the rotating beacon hypothesis. Imagine the signal wasn't broadcast everywhere, but was highly directional, like a focused beam. If this beacon was located on the surface of a rotating planet, its beam would sweep across space like a lighthouse. Earth just happened to be in the path of that beam for those 72 seconds as it swept by.
So it could still be transmitting, just not pointed at us anymore.
Exactly, or it could be periodic. Some analysis suggested that if the beacon had a rotation period similar to planets in our solar system, say 10 to 20 hours, detecting it just once in the limited observation time Big Ear spent on that spot is actually quite plausible statistically. It fits with the idea of an energy-conscious civilization maybe pulsing strong signals towards specific targets, rather than a continuous, power-hungry, omnidirectional broadcast.
Okay, that connects the signal's properties to ETI. But then there's this other, much more recent, and maybe even more speculative idea, linking it to an interstellar object.
Ah, yes, the potential connection to 3ILS. This is a theory primarily pushed by researcher Avi Loeb, and it links the 1977 signal to this object detected entering our solar system way later, in 2025.
What's the proposed link?
It's based on backtracking the object's trajectory. Loeb pointed out that if you account for the time it takes light to travel, 3I Atlas was roughly 600 astronomical units away from Earth around August 12, 1977. That distance means light, or a radio signal from its vicinity, would take about 3 days to reach us, which puts it incredibly close in space and time to the origin point of the wow signal detected on August 15th.
So the idea is the signal came first, and then this object followed.
The hypothesis suggests a kind of scenario where the wow signal was maybe an initial transmission, perhaps a powerful ping to see if anyone was listening. And when the civilization that sent it didn't get a reply over the following decades, they decided to investigate directly by sending a physical probe, 3I Atlas, along the same path. A follow-up mission, essentially.
That's a pretty wild idea. Is there anything about 3I Atlas itself that supports it being artificial?
Proponents point to a few things observed early on that they considered anomalous. Its calculated mass seemed potentially large for a typical comet. Its path was closely aligned with the plane of our solar system, and there was an observation of a sort of glowing jet pointing towards the sun. These are interpreted by some as possibly hinting at an engineered object, perhaps using some form of propulsion or venting material in a controlled way, rather than just natural cometary activity. Though it's important to stress this is highly speculative.
Beyond probes, are there other extraordinary ETI theories about the signal itself? Something about astroengineering.
Yes, some theories suggest the signal's uniqueness, its very transience, might be the evidence of advanced technology rather than a problem for the theory. Maybe it was an artificial superradiance event.
Superradiance, what does that mean in this context?
The idea is that an advanced civilization might not build a massive transmitter, but instead learn how to manipulate natural phenomena. They could potentially harness a large cloud of hydrogen gas in space. By pumping it with a huge amount of energy very quickly, maybe, as one paper speculated, using something like an array of optimized thermonuclear devices, they could cause the entire cloud to emit a powerful, coherent, narrowband pulse of radio waves, like a natural maser, but artificially triggered and amplified.
So a single massive engineered burst.
Exactly, a tremendous, highly directional flash of radio light. And because it requires such an immense, possibly destructive energy input to trigger, it would inherently be a non-repeatable event. In this view, the fact we only saw it once isn't a failure to detect a continuous beacon. It's confirmation that we witnessed a rare, energy-intensive, deliberate act of astroengineering. A fleeting, powerful statement constrained by the sheer cost of making it.
At first, it might seem like the only explanation is something extraordinary, but this is beyond the known. And this is the part where we step back and let science and grounded reason offer their side of the story. Okay, let's pivot to the more grounded scientific perspectives. The first hurdle for any unusual signal is always terrestrial interference, right? Radio frequency interference, or RFI.
Absolutely. And today, with our skies saturated with communications, most strange signals detected by SETI searches turn out to be human-made RFI. But the wow signal is harder to dismiss that way. Recent reanalysis of the original data specifically looked at the statistics. The chances of random, stray RFI hitting that exact frequency with that specific intensity 30 times the background noise and lasting exactly 72 seconds, while the probability is calculated to be astronomically low.
And the duration, 72 seconds, also argues against typical RFI sources from that time.
It does. Things like satellites in 1977 would have zipped through the telescope's narrow beam much faster, in maybe a second or less. Aircraft, too. It's hard to picture a terrestrial source hovering perfectly in the beam for exactly 72 seconds. Plus, and this is crucial, the signal was right on the protected hydrogen-line frequency band. That specific slice of the spectrum was, and still is, internationally restricted precisely to keep it clear of human transmissions for radio astronomy. An accidental signal landing there is less likely, though not impossible.
What about natural explanations? There was a theory involving comets for a while.
Yes, that surfaced some years ago. The idea was that hydrogen gas clouds surrounding comets passing through the beam could have emitted at or near the hydrogen frequency, but this explanation was pretty quickly and thoroughly debunked by the professional radio astronomy community. There were several major issues with the research proposing it.
Such as?
Well, for one, the original paper used unconventional units, decibels, instead of Janskys, making direct comparison difficult. More importantly, astronomers like Robert Dixon, who actually directed the Big Ear, checked the positions. They confirmed the comets proposed as the source were simply nowhere near the telescope's field of view at the time the signal was detected. They were in a completely different part of the sky.
And even if they had been in the right place.
The calculations showed that for a comet's hydrogen cloud to produce a signal that strong, that intense, it would need to be radiating radio waves millions of times more powerfully than even extremely active comets we've observed, like Hale-Bopp. It's just physically implausible for a comet. That theory doesn't hold water.
So if it wasn't RFI and it wasn't comets, what's the leading natural explanation currently?
The most promising natural explanation emerged from that recent, very detailed reanalysis of the original unpublished Big Ear archival data. This work refined some key parameters of the signal.
What did they find?
Critically, they revised the precise frequency slightly upwards to 1420.726 megahertz, plus or minus a small error margin. Now, this might seem like a tiny change, but it has big implications for the source's motion. This slightly higher frequency implies the source was moving away from Earth faster than previously thought. This higher radial velocity strongly suggests the source is likely galactic, located somewhere within our Milky Way, rather than being something local or even extragalactic.
And how does that connect to a natural phenomenon?
It supports a specific astrophysical model, a type of superradiance event, but a natural one. The idea is a maser-like flare, but originating from a small, cold cloud of neutral hydrogen abbreviated HI floating in the interstellar medium, the space between stars.
Natural maser. How would that work?
Yeah. The theory posits that this high cloud needs a sudden burst of energy from behind to trigger it. The proposed trigger is an intense but transient radiation source passing behind the cloud relative to us. Likely candidates for such a trigger are things like magnetars, neutron stars, with incredibly strong magnetic fields that occasionally flare up, or maybe soft gamma repeaters, another type of high-energy object.
So a magnetar flare hits the hydrogen cloud.
And the energy excites the hydrogen atoms in the cloud, causing them to amplify radio waves passing through them via stimulated emission, essentially acting like a natural laser, but for radio waves, a maser. This mechanism naturally produces a very intense, very narrowband burst of radiation. And because the trigger event, the magnetar flare, is transient, the resulting maser flash would also be brief and non-repeating. It neatly explains all the key features of the WOW: signal intensity, narrow bandwidth, duration, frequency, and non-repetition using known astrophysics.
What about the 3I Atlas object then? How does conventional science view it?
While the timing and trajectory link proposed by Love is intriguing, the overwhelming scientific consensus is based on observation. After it was detected, NASA and other astronomical bodies studied 3I Atlas and classified it officially as a comet. Its behavior, like ejecting water vapor far from the sun, is consistent with what we see from natural comets originating from the Oort cloud or interstellar space. There's no widely accepted observational evidence that contradicts its natural origin.
So no confirmed radio signals from it or anything suggesting artificiality?
No. Follow-up observations, including specific searches with sensitive radiotelescopes, haven't detected any artificial signals coming from 3I Atlas. The scientific approach follows Occam's razor. Assume the simplest natural explanation until compelling evidence forces you to consider something more extraordinary. Right now, it looks like an interesting interstellar comet, not an alien probe.
So where does that leave the
Well-
WOW signal overall? If powerful telescopes can't find it again, does that diminish its importance?
It definitely deepens the mystery. The fact that modern instruments like the Allen telescope array haven't redetected anything at those coordinates is significant. Some astronomers argue that maybe, just maybe, if the same signal occurred today amidst all the modern RFI, our automated filtering systems might just discard it as noise, and it wouldn't achieve the same legendary status. It was perhaps a product of its time, detected by a simpler system.
But the failure to repeat it doesn't automatically mean it was just noise or RFI, right?
Not necessarily. As we've discussed, both the rotating ETI beacon theory and the natural astrophysical maser flare theory predict a transient, non-repeating signal. So, the lack of repetition is actually consistent with several of the leading explanations, both natural and artificial. It confirms it was a rare event, but doesn't definitively tell us what kind of rare event it was. The ambiguity remains.
And that ambiguity, that uncertainty, is really what keeps the WOW signal relevant. It pushes us to keep searching and also to think about how we would communicate across space.
Exactly. It directly influences the field of MIDI messaging extraterrestrial intelligence. If we were to send a signal, how would we make it unambiguous? How would we ensure it's understood? The WOW signal serves as a sort of benchmark or maybe a cautionary tale.
You mentioned projects like BITG Beacon in the Galaxy.
Yeah.
How do they try to overcome these challenges?
BITG is a great example of current thinking. It's a proposed message designed to be broadcast from powerful facilities like the FAST telescope in China or the SETI Institute's Allen telescope array. The content itself encodes fundamental information, basic math, physics constants, the structure of DNA, a diagram of our solar system, and depictions of the human form. It uses binary code, assumed to be a universal language for computation.
And how does it address the problem of location and time, making sure a recipient knows where and when it came from, potentially millions of years later?
This is where modern METI messages differ significantly from earlier attempts, like the plaques on the Pioneer spacecraft. Those use pulsars as landmarks. But we now realize pulsar positions and even their pulse rates change over long timescales, making them unreliable galactic signposts. They are also subject to observational bias. We only see pulsars oriented correctly towards us.
So what does BITG use instead?
It uses much more stable, long-lived reference points, globular clusters. These are ancient, massive collections of stars symmetrically distributed around the center of the Milky Way. By mapping the sun's position relative to several well-known globular clusters, BITG provides a coordinate system that should remain accurate for potentially billions of years.
In telling them when the message was sent, that seems even harder.
It is complex. The approach is to establish a universal time zero. BITG proposes using the origin of the cosmic microwave background radiation, essentially, the afterglow of the Big Bang, about 13.8 billion years ago as time zero. Then it needs a universal clock tick. For this, it again uses the hydrogen line frequency, that same 1420.406 megahertz. The message effectively states the time elapsed since the Big Bang, measured in a vast number of hydrogen spin-flip cycles, which happen at that frequency.
So using the CMB as the start date and the hydrogen line as the clock rate.
It creates an absolute, cosmically understandable timestamp. It relies only on fundamental physics that any advanced civilization should also understand, regardless of their local biology or history.
So reflecting on the WOW signal, we're left with these stark possibilities. On one hand, maybe use an incredibly rare natural event, a specific kind of astrophysical maser flare we just happened to catch.
And on the other hand, perhaps it was an equally rare technological signal, a fleeting beacon from another intelligence, designed for maximum efficiency across cosmic distances. The mystery persists because both scenarios, in their own way, fit the strange data.
Was it the universe itself speaking through excited hydrogen, or was it a deliberate message constrained by the immense energy costs of interstellar communication?
We still don't know. But the act of searching and the incredible detail that goes into designing potential replies like BITG using universal constants, mapping our place relative to globular clusters, timestamping with the CMB tells us a lot. It shows how our own definition of intelligence, universality, and our place in the cosmos continues to evolve, driven by these enduring mysteries from the deep dark. The hope embedded in projects like BITG is that if WOW was a message, maybe our own carefully constructed signal will someday bridge that silence.
That's it for this journey beyond the known. If the unknown calls to you, do not forget to like, subscribe, and follow. There is so much more waiting to be discovered. And if you really want to help us out, consider becoming a member. With Secret Passage, you will unlock early access to our episodes, our audiobook library, Audiobook Underground, and a rotating list of curated wonders, other videos we recommend for curious minds. For those who want it all, Vault Access gives you everything, plus a board seat where you can request topics for us to explore in future episodes. Your support keeps the adventure alive.